Welcome to Untalented. This is season 2. I know what you're thinking. Ollie, you recorded 71 episodes in one season of absolute gold. How on earth could this get any better? And I agree, it's almost impossible to make this incredible podcast better, but it can improve. Jokes aside, we sort of figured out after speaking to 71 incredible professionals within this industry, we've done a lot of looking back. We've done a lot of meeting founders and understanding how they built businesses that were designed maybe 30, 20, or even 10 years ago. What's happening next? And if the world is going to be made up of 10% creative industry GDP, why don't more people know about it? If 75% of Gen Z wants to work in the creative economy, how can they find out where that is? So what can you expect in this next season? Better insights, bigger guests, and wilder predictions. This is Untalented. What's happening to our attention?
I mean, put really simply, it's fragmented. It's split into a million pieces. Anything that might have stood out 10 years ago to us in the feed actually doesn't anymore because we're so used to seeing certain ideas or certain pieces of content, or if it doesn't grab us in the first 3 seconds, we're immediately shut off to it.
The biggest hurdle, honestly, is the unlearning of the traditional way of doing things. Something that we talk about with all of our clients is let's not think about the campaign, because when you think of a campaign, you're automatically in a brand perspective. Again, the way that people are receiving this is not your Q1, this is what we're putting out into the world. Therefore, we need to do X, Y, and Z. People are going to be taking ideas that are good at any given moment in time, and they don't actually care if it's Q1 or Q2 or not.
Hello.
Hi. Hello.
Okay, hello. So thank you for joining us.
Welcome back to another episode of
Untalented by Unknown. That was one of the weirdest beginnings of a podcast. So Sadia and Dan, off of Small World. I want to use today, before we get into this weird question that we're going to ask you about your not archived WhatsApp chats, but your notes page, we're going to move into why Small World, how that was created, why did you come up with this thing? I want to move on to why did you join this bizarre human being that sits in front of me with a Jamaican grandfather and all the other little fun facts that I have about Dan. And then, most importantly, I want to get into what is happening to our attention and where is our attention going. But before I do that, I want to ask you the question, what is in the last message in your notes thingamajiggy on your iPhone? I'm going to start with you, Dan.
Okay. I mean, to be honest, I'd probably take you through a plethora of them, to be honest. Because 2 of them are just very simple, quick ones. List of movies that I never, ever get around to watching that just seems to become endless.
Top 3?
Moonlight, Easy Rider, Dogma, Good Will Hunting's in there as well.
Okay.
Religiously sit down on a Friday saying, I'm going to watch this film, and then end up putting on the most unbelievable trash of all time.
I'm in a maths hole at the moment, so
You're
I
in
can
a maths
relate to
hole
that.
Yeah. We were actually talking about Temptation Island.
Yeah.
Something that I've been through.
That's one to sit there. Watch that before Good Will Hunting.
Anyway, it shows you the gap between intention and actually what we do as actions. Second one is B-Day birthday party themes. I'm turning 30 this year, so I'm thinking about a bunch of themes for a birthday party.
What's the theme that you're most drawn to?
Hat party, I think.
Yeah, hat
easiest thing for people to do. Doesn't
you can
require
sort of grab it on the way out and be
exactly.
I just put a bin liner on my
Exactly.
head.
You can't do anything too strenuous. Otherwise people just won't do it. And then the third one, probably the most interesting, is just note to self, think about how to create an AI note chimp video note taker.
Wait, what is it? A chimp?
So it's basically you jump into we were having a call with one of our creatives recently from Roster, and he had this idea of I'd love to have something that just pops up, he was actually talking about getting a real chimp, but you jump onto a call and there's just, everyone has their AI note taker that just pops up in the call.
Yeah.
And instead of an AI note taker, it's just a chimp on a keyboard.
Yeah.
Just like a visual chimp.
Yeah, just a visual chimp. Well, he was talking about a real chimp, and I was like, I don't think that you can actually do that. I think there's a lot of regulations.
There's laws in that.
Yeah.
I feel like that, it makes it more friendly. Oh, chimps are quite scary. Maybe a little cute.
Yeah, he's got he's got a suit on, business attire, and you're like,
chimp.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is my intern.
That is the biggest issue when you get on a call and you see that weird note taker and you're like,
Yeah,
what are they?
it throws you off. It makes you feel a little bit less human. So we were like, okay, how can we make people feel comfortable with the fact that there's AI listening on this?
Yeah.
Have a chimp.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
we'll talk about that a bit later on, but that's kind of one of the side projects of Small World we got going on where we try and bring certain creatives' bottom drawer ideas that would never get funded anywhere else
That
to
is
life.
one you're actually working on right now.
Well, yeah, and
Wild.
now somebody might steal this,
Yeah.
but hopefully not. It's not as my note can tell. I've been looking into
Yeah.
it. It's not as easy as
I
you
can
might
imagine
think.
because you've got animation. Sorry,
Yeah.
right? So
We've got to do it before the podcast comes out.
We now have to do
basically.
it. That's
Now-
good. I've set us a deadline.
This is the
Yeah.
impetus you needed.
100%.
So, dear, what's the last thing? Wow, this is real. You're in your notes.
I will say the way that my notes is chaos.
Okay.
So I don't have notes for specific things. I just dump everything into one note until it's too long
Yeah.
to scroll.
Okay.
And then I just make a new one. So there's months of basically something in one note, and then I just move on to another one. So this is the last one that I've opened up. Breakup spots, the narrow boat. I was crowdsourcing where to break up with someone from my friends.
Sorry. What?
The narrow boat, Hackney Church, and Lucky Cane because pineapples make it nice. So those were what my friends recommended to me to break up with someone.
By a pineapple tree.
Yeah, by Lucky Cane. There's this place in Dalston, I
Okay.
think, or near Angel somewhere. But they just have these drinks that come in these giant pineapples, and they're like, well, if you're breaking up with someone, having a pineapple there just makes it a little bit nicer.
Very true.
Fair. Okay.
I did it over a WhatsApp message in the end, so
Did you
that was for nothing.
Did you fire off a pineapple emoji?
Oh, and by the way.
I did a little heart hands emoji to make
Okay.
it,
Oh,
make it
that's
a bit
cute.
sweeter.
Probably
Line
ended up
break.
in my archive chats.
After that, a couple of line breaks. The only people interested in advertising are the people buying it and the people selling it. That was probably like a late night thought that I just wanted to scribble down. A couple more line breaks after that. This one's a bit dark. If you're dealing with death, just know fighting is about proof of life. If you want to know what you're about as a man, fight. Peace is for the afterlife. Context for that is obviously I'm a fighter,
Yes.
so I think this is something that my coach had texted me. And I just copied and pasted it because it sounded profound.
Wow, cool.
Pieces for the afterlife.
Yeah.
Deep.
Shit's on my hat theme.
Yeah, what the fuck?
After that, need to buy safety pins, onions, magnesium. And then
This is diverse.
This is actually from our shoot that we just did on Monday with a client. Some lines. You want your curry in a hurry, yeah? 45 minutes. Be with you in 90 minutes, boss. And a few other variations of that and some shot feedback afterwards. So that's the last note that I had open.
I mean, the annoying thing about where those notes went is that we had a lovely segue to help me ask my first question, and then we went into onions. So I'm going to go back to the advertising thing where people are paying for intention, which is kind of, it's not what you said, but I'm going to take that. Dan, I want to know from the outside looking in. Okay, I look at this business called Small World. If I didn't know anything about this business, I would imagine, and you can tell me where I'm wrong here, it's a collection of creative human beings that make work that entertains the potential consumer or buyer of something. In its most basic form, why did you start Small World?
It's a good point. I think the pitchy proposition sell of Small World is different to the reason why we started it. And I'll start with the why,
Go with that
basically. And somebody actually helped me when we were doing our panels for South by. Somebody helped me kind of crystallize my thought on this and why it is. And I never realized this till recently, but I've always been obsessed with Willy Wonka. He's like the greatest, in my mind, greatest creative entrepreneur, risk taker the world has kind of ever seen. I think it's because I watched that. Maybe it was because I was like refreshing my memory watching that Timothée Chalamet version of it, where it's like his come up story, basically. But when you boil it down, he really is this sort of like, creative entrepreneur that set out to create a shop like no other. Otherwise, he wouldn't bother. That's like literally one of the quotes from the book. And I think when Harv and I were starting the business, that was the core thought in both of our heads was like, okay, we're about to leave our jobs, we're about to take a big leap and do something. And at the time, I think there were like 18,000 agencies alone in the UK. It's probably a larger number than that as well if you count up all the little studios, etc. There was just no point in doing it if we weren't going to create something that was genuinely had a point of difference and genuinely did something different within the market, because otherwise you're just adding more noise to the kind of chamber, so to speak, which again is something we'll talk about in the context of entertainment later on. Our big wish was, let's do something hard because, good things effectively come from taking the hard way towards a path. And the hard thing that we found or more likely sort of the easy route that lots of agencies take is you get a brief that comes in and you just decide to bring whatever talent you have to that brief because it's based on selling time effectively within traditional agencies. But that isn't necessarily the best way of matching talent to briefs. So originally in its core kind of composition, it was about creating the Ocean's 11 of agencies. And again, that isn't a totally new concept. People have been trying to do hub and spoke models for quite a while. And at first we thought that was a kind of our, shop like no other. And we very quickly realized that actually that wasn't the best use of this type of model. That isn't the most interesting thing about it. What's actually more interesting and what actually creates this shop like no other is if you build that talent pool that you're building these teams from talent that has never worked on briefs within branding or advertising at all. People that we call, genuine entertainers or industry unstandard talent. And, it's fitting that we're on a podcast called Untalented with someone who knows talent talking about it. Yeah, there you go. Nice plug. Just in case you didn't know what you're listening to. That's effectively now what Small World does. We make, in a nutshell, we make brands more entertaining, and we do that by working with, the very best sort of brand and advertising thinkers who understand the relationship with brands and understand how to effectively, communicate with brands. But then we bring in these sort of right brain thinkers from worlds totally outside of advertising and marketing, from the new, what we call the new creative class. And again, we'll touch on who those people are and, what drives them, to create work that genuinely stands out and entertains people and feels like something that you would actively pay for a subscription for or choose to watch, just like the kids in the other room watching that YouTube video, for instance. I bet the guys who made that that YouTube video could be brilliant creatives on our roster, for instance.
I love it, and it saying that you're pushing against going for the path of least resistance, like that logistically must be hard. How do you constantly find right brain thinkers and convince them to work in the commercial world? Can you give me one? I want to come to Sadia in a second to ask, why did you join this thing? Because you've got this incredible background. You've worked at a ton of different advertising agencies, experience agencies. Before I ask you that, can you give me one example? How old is Small World now?
Technically, I would say we've only got going in the last year since we had the mother investment, but about 3 years from before that, since Harv and I were running about with our laptops.
What was the one moment, or maybe even an inflection point, where you were like, oh, this is working, and it's not only just working, it's delivering the results that we were hoping it would?
Yeah. I honestly, I think in the last year, I mean, obviously Mother investing in our, for those who don't know, Mother is a minority investor in our business, the greatest, I would say, creative company in the world, definitely the best independent creative agency in the world, for sure. That was obviously a big sign of validation, but then equally alongside that brought a lot of attention to us, and we've now started to work with clients, big and small, basically, who are, actively seeking out our proposition. And we just released a big, report called Entertain or Die 2, which has been a massive success. And again, off the back of that, we're starting to see clients actually really resonate with this message and want to adopt some of the techniques that we're effectively putting out to the market.
Can I just get really granular with that? So I'm a Coca-Cola right now, and I come across Entertain or Die, which is like a white paper, I guess, that you put out into the world to be like, brands, it's really important that you should be entertaining right now because you're being ignored. Yeah. What are they seeing? What are they resonating with when they read that that makes them go, holy shit, we should listen up to this?
Yeah, I think to Sadia's point at the beginning of, the only people who are interested in advertising are the ones who are buying and selling it. The main shift that report tries to help brands make is go from a media buyer to a media owner. And that's the big shift that all of these brands are seeing, going from being the ones who are buying Super Bowl spots to creating content, original programming, scripted, unscripted, that people genuinely want to watch, that just has the brand baked into that experience. And we're starting to see budgets shift from, and you talk a lot about this in the context of sort of social influencer creator as well, we're starting to see big parts of budget shift from a more traditional kind of, I guess, advertising media first model to an earned first model, where people are creating content that, people are genuinely seeking out. And it is harder. I'm not going to lie to you and say that it's easy to do. If it was easy to do, everyone would be doing it. But yeah, we're starting to see that shift from brands. I mean, even, anecdotally on a large scale, examples like the Barbie movie and the Minecraft movie that have come out recently, massive IP projects from brands that are traditional consumer brands, is reflective of that change from selling people an advert. The Barbie movie and the Minecraft movie are effectively massive ads, but without feeling like ads at all. So yeah, that's.
I got you. Sadia,
Yeah.
why? What was it about Small World that made you think this is really interesting and a bit of me?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't Dan's conciseness. I will say, part of why I chose these guys was because of the fact that now that I've joined them, none of us consider what we're doing actual advertising. Going back to how I started off in the industry, I've told Dan and the guys this a couple of times, but I didn't even know I was working in advertising until my second job in advertising. Genuinely, I was like, cool, here's a bunch of really interesting people from all walks of life, and we're making something together. And that was my first role ever outside of college and university was at We Are Social initially. I think I just got an iPhone literally like a couple months prior to the job. Didn't have any social platforms whatsoever, but here I was making content for a social agency. And I didn't know what I was doing with social media content creation. I didn't know what I was doing with advertising. What I knew is that we were making something that people wanted with a bunch of people that I wanted to make stuff with. The brand element of it all and the client element of it all and the advertising of it all was secondary to what I was doing. And you can fall in love with something really quickly when you are just doing something with people that are fun to create with. And so every step of my career since then has kind of been chasing that. Everywhere I've gone has been, for the most part, with mixed results, of course, trying to find the types of people that I wanted to work with, that I thought would be fun to create with, and then therefore we could make something that really resonated in the world. So prior to moving over to London a year and a half ago, I was at LeBron James's company, Spring Hill Company. And some of the most internet-breaking work that we did we created because the people who are working on it genuinely gave a shit about what they're creating for. I mean, you're in the world of sports, you're in the world of NBA and fandoms, and I've worked in sports now for the last 8, 9, 10 years, however long it's been now. We're actual fans of what we're doing, and so the only way to kind of create work that cuts through is to, again, care about it deeply. Yeah. And that way we were able to create things that long form, short form, seeding kits, whatever it could be, yes, those all count as elements of advertising in some way, shape, or form. But really what it was fans creating for this thing that they cared about. And then I moved over to London and ended up at an agency where it felt a bit more traditional. And that was where I had that first kind of like fissure, that break with, what am I actually doing this for? It's not because I care about a scope of work or I care about a client's KPIs. And to this day, I still don't have the lingo and the terminology that most people in advertising have picked up over the years, just because it was white noise in my brain. I really didn't know that's what, it's a bit fucked to say this, but I really didn't care about what the actual results were for the things that I was creating. I just cared about, is it a good piece of content? Is it something entertaining? Is it something that's going to go out in the world and people are going to be like, yes, that's from the world that I care about?
Because the results they're a byproduct, right, of amazing work. The results will come.
Yeah. And then obviously if you get all those elements right, it'll do well for you regardless. Or at the very least, it'll shift brand sentiment in some way, which is something that I think a lot of brands are trying to do. But I found myself in a very traditional space where, as Dan spoke about, the way that traditional agencies are set up, it's not necessarily about what you care about or whether you're right for the brief for the project or whether the client needs you on this. Is, do you have availability? Do you have 8 hours this week to put onto a designing project? Do you have 4.5 hours to write up a couple of taglines for us? And that's where you just start to see weaker and weaker hooks for people's attention. So when I spoke to Dan and Harvey and Tom at Small World, the thing that caught my ear and it took a while too. I think we had a couple of conversations and initially I was like, nope. And then I think the second time I was like, nope. And then the third time I was like, okay, yeah, I'm all in, was because of the fact that our entire model is based around bringing people into this industry who, one, typically wouldn't have access to it or don't even know about it. We're talking about comedy writers and content creators and just people who aren't from the ad world, but are people who live in the world of creativity, and then pairing them up with traditional ad creatives, because again, you do need that. You do need traditionally trained creatives to come up with a big idea in the platform and, really be able to sell an idea through. But the idea of being able to work with a diverse group of people and being able to pair them on projects that they actually cared about, are those not the magic moments that every creative cares about? Is that not what you live for as a creative? When you're sitting in a room and maybe it's 11 p.m. and maybe your brain is fried, but you're having so much fun thinking of something because you care about this brief that's on the table. The fact that that's the premise of what we do, at least internally when it comes to creating our teams, I don't think there's any other agency that really functions in that way. With the roster that we have, at least when I was speaking to them, it felt that way. So being able to join them and then now be able to curate these teams and watching these like magical moments where people have never worked together not coming to me with scripts that they wrote on their own is just phenomenal. And so yeah, that was what sold me on Small World, and
That was the one.
it's been working beautifully.
I love that. I want to go into like I guess the impact beyond being an agency, beyond being a brand, like to the consumer, to the human being that has their phone in their hand and they're scrolling on whatever platform they scroll on. I know if I think about me, like it's quite weird if you look at yourself through a different lens, like imagining just filming yourself whilst like your thumb sometimes stops on something. What I feel like my attention's getting worse, and I think I would speak for most people now when I say nothing grabs my attention. Like a 90-second TVC, can't name you one. If I even think of an ad right now, and lots of our agency friends and clients are producing ads the whole time. I don't think if I'm even seeing them, and if I am, I'm not listening or watching. What's happening to our attention, not just as a consumer, but as human beings now with all of this stuff out there?
Yeah. I mean, put really simply, it's fragmented. That's the number one thing that we're communicating to clients across the board. It's split into a million pieces. I think in the 1980s, there were 3 massive terrestrial TV channels in the US alone, right? ABC, NBC, and CBS. Today, there's 600. So like that alone just shows you kind of how the media is fragmented across even like a traditional form of media like TV. Then you look at something like social media. I mean, I don't even know how many accounts there are across TikTok and Instagram, but it's in the millions, for instance. Yeah. Each one of those is effectively its own mini TV channel, right? And all of these are accessible, at the click of a button in the palm of our hand, which is amazing from one point of view because it's really democratized content and democratized storytelling, and there's some really brilliant stories that never would have been told without those tools, but it's also pretty scary and depressing and horrible from another point of view, accelerated by AI because of, the slop that exists out there. That's a term that everybody's kind of familiar with now, brain rot, etc., which effectively numbs us a little bit and makes it harder for things to stand out. The same thing that might have stood out 10 years ago to us in the feed actually doesn't anymore because we're so used to seeing certain ideas or certain pieces of content, or if it doesn't grab us in the first 3 seconds, we're immediately shut off to it. Even if you're paying for that, by the way. One of the things that we talk about in Entertain or Die too is like the reason why the world needs more entertaining ideas just in general, and we need to do more to stand out, is the fact that costs on Meta have gone up 222% in the last decade. So the same amount of attention, if you're a brand, the same little sliver of attention that you could actually buy 10 years ago has effectively gone up, or the costs that it basically costs for you to acquire a customer has gone up 222% in that last decade. So even if you have loads of money to buy someone's attention, the sliver that you can buy of their attention and the assurance that it's actually reaching them is exponentially higher.
So, Brad, I guess from all of that, when you used to be able to acquire attention, and there'll be a return on investment. Like speaking very plainly, if I get my brand in front of you on your Instagram feed, and you then acquire or buy the product that I'm trying to sell you, yay, this has worked.
Yeah, exactly.
The world has I think the few things have happened in the back end of platforms as well, where platforms themselves have to retain that attention too, right?
Yeah.
So if they oversell the advertising, I remember on Instagram, like maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, every second thing would have been an ad, which would then drive you away from that platform onto TikTok, which is now, again, when you speak about democratization, we were speaking earlier today about how the follower account is now less relevant than just making something really good that has an impact on people. Are there rules? And how helpful is it to have a set of principles or rules when it comes to creating this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to link it to what Dan just spoke about because I think we're talking a lot about brands, but 90% of people don't spend their lives thinking about brands. No. I certainly don't. I'm done thinking about brands and advertising the minute I'm done with like a deck, basically. There's also all the ways that people share nowadays. Again, there used to be phone calls, letters, telegrams way back when. Now there's Instagram DMs, and then also your in-feed posts, and now there's threads, and now there's WhatsApp channels, and there's Snapchat and Discord channels, and there's all these different ways that people are just constantly being inundated with things. And yet brands are still thinking about what they want to say to people rather than the ways that people are communicating with each other. So the minute that you come with a bunch of rules and a checklist, like I remember even like 2016, it was, you need to have your brand hit in the first 3 seconds, and then you need to have this because that's what the algorithm is telling us that, will get people's attention. The algorithm almost doesn't matter to a certain degree because people aren't receiving things within that feed anymore. They're receiving it in a shared WhatsApp channel. They're receiving it overhearing a conversation somewhere. So I think primarily where brands mess up a bit is when they are concerned about how to get their message across to people and to how to get this very curated specific tagline that they've had their team think about for months in front of people in a creative way. Whereas what most people are thinking about is 1,000 other things. And the thing that cuts through is the thing that's going to make them want to share it, basically, on whatever channel they're on. If you're considering channels and platforms first as your method of putting out short form or long form content, you're automatically coming with a set of checklists on you need to hit this for it to be paid. And what you've lost is the shareability of it, which is realistically, if something is on YouTube and it's long form, you automatically think that you need to have a 15-second version of it on Instagram because otherwise no one's going to share it. But if that YouTube long-form video is good, if it's entertaining, if it actually is a proper story, it will be shared across multiple different channels. Your friend will WhatsApp it to you. Your homie will send it to you in a DM. Someone on Hinge is going to send it in a message. It doesn't necessarily matter which has just happened last night as well. The minute you tell someone you work in advertising, it's like, here's this great ad. Great, thank you very much.
Wasn't mine, but thanks. Yeah.
So I think what really the shift is nowadays is less of the checklists, less of the listed deliverables, less of the content calendars, and more of what are people open to receiving, which is entertainment, which is a great story, which is something that you can build your brand into. But when you come to it with a brand's checklist, you've kind of lost the purpose of what you're intending to do, which is grab someone's attention. So it's a bit of a fallacy to ask that question. What are the rules for short form versus long form content? There are no rules, the same way that there are no rules for writing a book or creating a film or creating a piece of music. Is it good?
The only caveat I'd add to that is, and Sadia touched on it there, but rather than a set of rules of what we need to achieve here, it's what are we actually going to measure? Because I think that's one of the things that we found clients struggle with is, okay, we want you to be more entertaining as a brand. There are no rules. This is about creating something that doesn't feel like advertising. That sounds great, but it also sounds very scary to a client necessarily. And I think a large part of what we've tried to do through education is communicating that it is possible to measure the success of entertainment first projects. It's very possible to approach it like an experiment, like a scientific experiment, rather than just, fuck it and find out creative. Exactly. Yeah. It's very possible to approach those things in the same way. And there's really interesting things that brands like Liquid Death, who everyone sees as like the most creative business ever and is, talked to no end about on LinkedIn. There's really interesting things that they actually do from a data perspective and a measurement perspective to track whether a piece of content is actually entertaining. And it's not tracking whether 10 billion people had an impression on it, which, by the way, is a bullshit. An impression is like 3 seconds worth of someone looking at it, and they haven't even properly looked at it. What they're looking at, like Sadia said, is did someone share this? Did someone save this? Those are the genuine metrics that people can't game necessarily, or at least the platforms can't game and suppress. It's not about having a checklist for things, but it's about agreeing from the beginning. How are we going to measure if this is actually successful? And let's do that in the right way.
How do they? I'm imagining like being a CMO at this point and going, right, okay, love the idea of this, but like I have a boss or I have a share price to hit or whatever. What's the most common challenge or reservation that you're hit with when you're pitching entertainment versus another paid or performance marketing campaign?
Yeah, I mean, it's always time and resource. The old adage, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM. It stands true for this as well. No one ever, there probably are people who got fired for this, but no one ever got fired for, just buying a Super Bowl ad or sticking to meta spend and just putting it into something that is known, tried and tested. They do for experimenting in some cases and doing kind of things that are outside of the norm. So it goes back to the beginning of it, it's good things are hard to do. Yeah. Average, medium things are easy to do. So it's sometimes easy to just stick to that and stay in the middle lane.
Yeah. I think the biggest hurdle, honestly, is the unlearning of the traditional way of doing things. Something that we talk about with all of our clients is let's not think about the campaign, because when you think of a campaign, you're automatically in a brand perspective, which absolutely makes sense because you are a brand and you have key metrics you need to hit, and you have your CMO telling you need to hit this target. That makes sense. But again, the way that people are receiving this is not your Q1, this is what we're putting out into the world. Therefore, we need to do X, Y, and Z. People are going to be taking ideas that are good at any given moment in time, and they don't actually care if it's Q1 or Q2 or not. So finding their way to kind of unlearn how they typically do their brand marketing, which for us is something that we've recently started doing with our clients, is honestly just like thinking sessions, lab sessions, experimental sessions, where it is a bit like, give us a bit of time to get a bit weird with it. You know, it doesn't mean you're blowing your entire Q1 budget on this, but with a little bit of experimental thinking, you can find something successful that works for you that then becomes something that you can replicate across the year that doesn't go into your big campaign budget that you need for this. And so it's the little steps in basically unteaching the world on how a brand should behave and how a marketing budget should look and what a campaign should look like and your Q1 metrics and this and that. That I think is like the biggest hurdle because people don't have the time and the resources, Dan said, to, you know, it's so easy to just say, great, we've got to push this product this quarter. I'm just going to have my marketing person, my salesperson come up with the content calendar for when this is going to come out. And then you've already kind of missed the boat because the point is people aren't waiting for this content calendar moment to receive this information about this thing. When the moment hits, you have to be ready to strike a bit. So again, it's just a lot of little moments, I think, is primarily what we're working with a lot of our clients on, and less big campaign thinking, because then you've kind of handcuffed yourself to something months in advance. When a cultural moment happens, you're not ready to hit it because you're planning for this massive, you know, ad campaign, and pushing them more towards experimental, smaller moments. I think ultimately that's where the industry is heading towards, and that's where creativity, honestly, is at its best, is when something happens and you're really ready to hit on it right away.
Yeah. Grace Kite, who's a really brilliant econometrics expert, should look her up and see all of her writing. But she talks about this and she calls it the lots of little strategy, basically. And this is from like a media perspective. Even if you're buying media, it's better to, in this kind of media fragmented world that we live in, have lots of little placements across lots of different places because people benefit from or people remember, the best thing that they saw and the most recent thing that they saw. And both of those things benefit from volume. It's the same reason why, you know, the art collective Mischief is so successful, because they have these regular drops that hit like clockwork on a, you know, 6-week basis, effectively on rotation. It's the same reason why Liquid Death is so successful, because they get, you know, ideas out quickly and kind of have this like minimum viable creative idea approach to what they do. Same reason why Duolingo is so successful as well. There's actually a good, really kind of funny, quirky story, I guess, that puts this into context. But a day after the Super Bowl happened, Duolingo stole 84% of the conversation of all of the brands combined put together on social by killing Duo the Owl with a Tesla Cybertruck. And I think that just puts into context and shows all of this money that was put into all of those Super Bowl ads that had a big moment, great, is in the era of the internet forgotten within 24 hours.
How do you, so the whole like going back to the IBM thing, right? How do you design the environment for a brand to be in an experimental place? Like, give me a dream situation or a dream client that walks through the doors of Small World and goes, "Hey, I'm X. I want to try Y." What kind of environment are you creating with those humans? So they go.
I think ultimately it's the same way that you would foster trust with a human that you've met for the first time ever. It's almost like a first date. You know, you want to come across well, of course, but what you really want to do is learn more about the other person. Is this person right for me? Do they understand me? To be honest, that's how we approach all of our clients. We can't really foster trust with them to get weird and experimental if we don't understand them through and through. So that does mean also understanding their marketing objectives, why their teams function the way that they do. We ask a lot of questions about how much internal resource do you have? You know, where does your brain bandwidth go to? Why haven't you done this type of thing before? What's your dream kind of execution that you want? What's something that you want to try that you haven't? We'd spend a lot of time understanding them inside and out, almost as if we're sitting across the table from them on a first date. And then the second date and the third date, you really get to understand them. And so when you come to them with something, you know, we've all had that moment on a human level where you're having a conversation with someone and they say something, you're like, my God, they understand me. That's really the kind of feeling that we want to replicate with all of our clients, because when you have that kind of trust that they truly understand what I'm trying to do and what the actual goal of all of this is, which is building a relationship first and foremost, first between us and our client, but then the client and the audience that they want to reach, then they're more likely to take your hand and kind of take that step forward with you to do something a bit more experimental. So we spend a lot of time getting quite close with our clients. We do workshops. We do exercises that are a bit like icebreakers on a a date type of thing. You know, what are some weird facts about your brand and you? You get to hear a lot of how they talk about their brands, a lot of the people that we speak to in client side too, they don't always get in the same room themselves. So we get them in the same room together, and we realize that their definition of what the campaign tagline is for this thing is actually very different than what their CCOs is. It's very different than what their social calendar person's is. So you find the differences, and then you actually find the commonality, and then that's where you find that tiny, like the landing strip for that is so small, but it comes from these conversations that we typically have with our clients, and that fosters this kind of willingness to step into the lab with us and get a bit experimental with everything.
I'm with you. I want to just ask a question, sorry, on short form, long form, because we mentioned this before the podcast. And again, like, is there a rule? I hate to make this about adolescence, but I have to. Like, never do I apart from maths, what the fuck is going on? Like, I just watched 23 back-to-back episodes of Maths, and I'm in it. And I'm sorry to admit that. Okay, I'm not. I'm actually sorry, not sorry. I also, Maths, which is basically like a bunch of couples, not couples, getting with each other, wild, right? On the other end, I'm spending like a night watching Adolescence, which is completely the reverse of what Maths is. It's about, young kids and masculinity. Meanwhile, I'm sort of half on my phone at the same time, although I wasn't when I was watching Adolescence.
Yeah.
Both of these are long form. Equally, I'll watch a meme. I'm kind of like dual screening here, and I'll watch a funny thing, and that has my attention. Remember, is there a red thread between this stuff? Like, what is the commonality between where my attention is going, and what's the how do I make this stuff?
I would actually look at it from an optimistic point of view. So one of the things we talk about is how culture has gone from mainstream to niche, and actually the gate to the mainstream is through the niche. And I guess what we mean by the niche is yes, micro influencers and creators and communities and fandoms that previously were small, which can now be big because of the internet, but also actually the ability for previously big things that would be water cooler moments like Severance or White Lotus or Adolescence, right? Actually being shared across hundreds of different channels in hundreds of different podcasts and meme pages and content creators who are creating content, of some of which we're actively working with. I actually think the flip side is that you don't have this shared understanding. Like, we probably, not everybody in this room necessarily has watched Severance or watched White Lotus, but if we have seen or heard that thing, or we are into that thing, you can get so much deeper into it than you have ever been able to before, because of this like nicheification of culture, if you will. There are so many more people creating content about particular concepts in lots of different formats, cutting it up into lots of littles, as we spoke about before. So it feels like, if you're in it, these moments are far bigger than they ever were before. I was so much deeper into Severance than I probably ever would have been a show like Lost 10 years or so ago, which perhaps more of my friends would have seen. So I think that's actually really interesting.
So this cuts to the whole thing where you were saying about being an earner, not an owner. Like, you don't, just because I don't own the IP of White Lotus, that doesn't mean I can't, associate my brand or associate my, whatever my message is, to that thing.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the biggest change, right? You're saying across multitudes of different platforms, you can tap into the thing that you don't even own, but you can still, like Duolingo with the Super Bowl, right?
Exactly. I mean, Duolingo are one of the masters of doing that. They've recognized fandoms and cultures that are hyper engaged, and then they have just given back to those fans in lots of different ways, whether it's Game of Thrones fans or Swifties, or even they did something recently in the world of Severance as well. And they're willing to kind of take those risks and engage with, instead of engaging with the principal right holder, IP holder, or if they try to engage with that principal right holder and they're too slow or can't engage with them, instead they'll go to the fandoms, they'll go to these niche pockets of culture that are associated with a bigger project to, basically associate their brand with that central IP.
Does it mean, like, it's tempting to, I can't not do this podcast without mentioning AI. It's tempting to kind of go, surely, knowing this is a mass game and knowing that it's about tapping into different things left, right, and center, you could utilize that to your advantage. How do you see AI playing out, particularly in your world of entertainment?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm, again, ever an optimist, and I think AI is a Iron Man suit that can be put around the very best creatives so that they can work better, more efficiently, have basically a junior creative to actually help them out on doing things. But there is definitely the dark side of that, which is, I mean, I'm sure you've seen hundreds of like AI clips online, right? Clip culture is a massive thing that we haven't really spoken about. And this idea that you create one central piece of content and then use AI or use an editor or whoever it might be to clip it into 100 different pieces. There's, the likes of Stephen Bartlett who do it really well, and
Andrew Tate.
from the good side of things. And I was going to say, and then there's the bad side of things, somebody like an Andrew Tate who can actually get around being banned because he has this sort of army of clip creators who can create both real and fake clips for himself. And I guess the main risk is that rather than people believing that, I actually think the more scary thing is that people just think everything's fake and disengage en masse from culture. And, we did a talk at South by Southwest, which was all about the zombie internet. And that's this concept that the internet now people feel is just filled with AI content and nobody's actually real on the internet. And we ourselves become zombies because we're just mindlessly scrolling through it and not actually trusting or believing anything that we see there. So that's kind of the dystopian view of it.
Yeah.
But I'm more of an optimist.
To me, that just says that, it cuts through. Sorry, Steve, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, AI, Dan and I have differing and also similar sometimes opinions on AI. I think the role of it in the industry is the one that people think it's going to have, but what it's actually going to have is AI is a junior creative's worst enemy, but it's also a future creative director's worst enemy as well. Because if you're considering it as a creator, then that's fucked. Like, that's not going to work for you very well. If you're considering it as a tool for creatives, then amazing. That's when it becomes an Iron Man type of armor. I think what's going to happen in about 10 to 15 years is all these senior creatives, creative directors who have replaced managing, training, creatively developing their junior creatives, teaching them how to think, teaching them how to find their pure human insight and story and build it out. In 10 to 15 years, they're going to look around and be like, oh God, who am I going to hire now? There's no one who's senior enough, who's been trained enough to be able to continue on this work because I've replaced training real people on how to use tools like AI with AI, if that makes sense. So that is where it's a bit of like a nuanced take on that. It is your superpower. Totally. It can be a tool. But if you think of it as a member of your team, you're gonna be very lonely in about 10 years' time, basically.
Wait, okay, so I want to know, like, right now, what are you using, like, as an Iron Man suit for AI on a daily basis? What are you using that you're finding is making you become like a superhero in creative?
Yeah, I'm obsessed with Claude AI.
Claude.
Yeah, I know people use ChatGPT a lot, but I think ChatGPT is a bit more. And again, these are why it's tools. The same reason why someone uses Photoshop for one thing, but Illustrator for another. These are all tools that you use in different ways. ChatGPT to me is more of a search engine and more of a research analyst, something that you use to get a lot of information quickly.
Yeah.
Claude AI I use quite a lot for bouncing stuff off of, giving them some of my writing and asking for feedback, honestly. Which again is a bit strange because I'm contradicting myself. I'm using it as a person, but also we're a 4-person team. I don't have someone that can ask for feedback right now. Claude AI is something I use quite frequently. I do recommend it to all creatives to use specifically for writing. It's really great in kind of breaking down. And it does help if you're using it, again, as a tool to teach yourself things. You give it a sentence and you ask, how can I make this better? It'll actually tell you how you can make it better. Then that is where you need the human insight to be able to decipher, is this thing actually giving me what I need to make it better or not? That's where taste is a whole thing that we can have a whole podcast episode about. That's where taste comes into play. And taste is a trainable skill too. That's something that AI will never have, at least not in the next 10 to 15 years again. But that's one that I use quite frequently.
Yeah.
To be honest, I use it mostly for, I function as kind of the head of marketing of the business as well as the strategy partner for the business. So where I use it to kind of shorten the work stream for myself is in like creating content. Largely Midjourney I've been playing around with a lot recently. Midjourney's brilliant for, helping create images that I could never even dream of designing myself. And I'm really open and honest about it when I post my content on LinkedIn, etc., about the fact that I'm using AI to do this. And, there are tons of I guess, legal implications that ChatGPT are getting into at the moment with the Studio Ghibli style, references, and there's so much nuance to that that's kind of, unbelievable to go into. Yeah. I always, where possible, I'm like referencing kind of artists that if I've used a piece of something as a reference to use in Midjourney.
Right?
Exactly, like referring back to it. But yeah, mostly that's how I've been using it, is just to shorten that gap. And then I guess it's like, just management of your day, right? There's certain tools that you and I know use, so maybe I won't give away the secret.
No, don't do the secret. I'm not actually here right now.
But there's loads of like, just management of calendar. And again, that's the other side of it, right? Where it's like
Efficiency.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't
100%.
think that will ever replace cretivity as we're talking about here. That's 100% an efficiency play.
I want to go into the future. I want to like imagine, right now, what are like 2 years from now, what world do you see? Like if everything goes well with Small World and you're going, this is the kind of stuff that we're going to be making, what kind of impact on the world or what kind of thing do you dream of creating?
You want to answer first?
I'll let you go first.
Yeah?
If you want.
I mean, to be honest, everything, which is a bit of a cop-out answer, but I think, again, that was one of the reasons why we joined forces together. We don't consider ourselves an advertising agency whatsoever, or even a creative agency, honestly. We're still playing around with what to call ourselves, because when you're doing something new for the first time that hasn't been done before, there is no set of 2 to 3 words that you can put together that kind of defines that. I think ideas agency and entertainment first thinking is something that we're thinking about, but at the moment, there's 1,000 different ways that we're kind of branching out into the world. Our roster is like obviously core at everything that we do, the creators that we work with, the people that we have that are part of our agency, but also live their own lives and have other jobs and whatnot. Something that we're doing is basically every single creative has 20 ideas that they've always wanted to have made and have never been able to because client doesn't have budget or time ran out, or they didn't have the time or the resource to finish it on their own. So we're currently reaching out to creatives and asking them, what is the thing that you've always wanted to make? Pitch it to us, but also we'll help you make it. We'll help you develop it. We'll give you that extra bit that you need, whether it's time, resource, strategic thinking, some creative support. So in an ideal world, we'll have our client and brand-based business, obviously creating content, campaigns, stunts, events, bits and pieces like that, but also having athletes and artists and creators themselves who want to have this platform to create something with, and us basically bringing them into our roster and then working with them to make that thing out into the world. So essentially the same thing that we're recommending brands to do, which is don't just be a company, be a channel. That is the ultimate goal for Small World, and it's something that we're doing on a very micro scale right now, but the more we grow, the more and more possible it's going to be for us to continue to bring people onto our roster and then have them basically empowered to make more in the world that they want to be making.
That just got me thinking. So, okay, don't make content, become a channel. Can you give me an example of someone that's doing that really well? Or someone that makes you jealous?
Interesting. Brand that's kind of making us jealous. Well, I mean, and hopefully we'll be working with these guys in the near future, but again, maybe I've wished it into existence or done the opposite and got it out of being existence. But I think actually, and these guys are a media owner, are originally a media owner, but perhaps operate in a more traditional sense. So Channel 4, again, amazing broadcaster, one of the traditional 5 channels here in the UK, have been around for ages. Everything they're doing with Channel 4.0 is amazing. Again, I don't know if you've seen this, but it's like reimagining effectively what Channel 4 would be in the era of Mr. Beast or in the era of the Sidemen for a new platform. And I think it's just indicative of how even a media owner themselves, even a brand that is considered a media owner, can reinvent and can reimagine what they're doing. So Channel 4.0 is a purely digital platform where they're commissioning content exactly for a new audience and for a new platform across YouTube, TikTok, clip culture, everything that we've sort of spoken about before, but breathing new life into a, again, I'm not saying a stale channel, but a kind of more traditional legacy media player. I think that's what I'm jealous of or excited by is again clients and brands that are starting to do this kind of experimentation style strategy and really leaning into it and doing it full force, because that's exactly the strategy they followed, was just like small bets. Let's start to build this channel up as we go. There's actually something, that I remember that I didn't manage to say earlier on in terms of like when we get a new client who comes in, how do we sort of get their trust effectively and start to build things. My piece of advice is when they come in, ask them what is the bit that the CEO cares about least within the business? Like, what is the thing that is going to have the least amount of eyes on it at all, and that people just don't really get or understand, and just kind of like, oh yeah, let that thing kind of happen over there. You know, for Duolingo, when they first started, it was TikTok, and because of that, they just had full freedom, no fear. They're allowed to just kind of operate as they see fit and really experiment there. And I think that's, to me, will be sort of the interesting thing, is like there will be an increase in experimentation over the next couple of years across all of these brands as we see, you know, the diminishing returns of big bets. Small bets will come to the fore.
Wait, so okay, get creative with me right now. Because I want to imagine like a brand that is just not interesting right now. Beko. I'm sorry, Beko. I love your washing machines. They are fantastic. But would you even recommend, right? Beko CEO, I don't know what that guy's thinking or girl is thinking about right now, but let's say that there's a part of their business which they've completely ignored. This is putting you on the spot a little bit here.
Yeah.
But how could a brand as boring as a washing machine brand like Beko, I think I'm saying that right, Beko, how could that, what would you do with that situation? They walk in through the door. First, you can say that wouldn't be the right client for us. If they would be a client that you would consider, and they walked in through the Small World Tower doors, and they go, we want to do something a little bit entertaining and different, like how would you approach that conversation?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I have such an intimate relationship with my washing machine in the most bizarre way. Not in that way, just saying. So I'm an athlete, of course, outside of, we've talked about this before, but the amount of laundry I do on a daily basis, because I'm an MMA and Muay Thai fighter, I train twice a day, 6 times a week. It's a bit insane. So I could have an entire wardrobe of gym clothes, or I could just do laundry a lot. And to be honest, I just recently moved flats, and the first thing I was looking at is like, is the washer able to handle the amount of clothing that I need to wash on a daily basis so that I can go to training? Again, it's less about your product and less about what you want to say about your product, but more about what are people actually receiving about this thing? What are people using this for? And for me, my washing machine makes it possible for me to do the sport that I love the most. It is literally the most important appliance that I have. So it's really basic, to be honest, and there's no rewriting or rules here, because I think the truth will be the truth no matter what, which is when you find the core human thing, the one thing that's universally accepted and true about your product or your brand, the offshoots of that are just infinite, basically. So for a Beko, I guess, which is a brand I've never heard of before, sorry, holler if you want after this. But what I would look at is, outside of just being a really utilitarian appliance, moms using it all the time, athletes using it all the time, like artists washing their canvases all the time. Like there's lots of different ways that it's used. What role does it play in people's lives? And then automatically you can think of 1,000 different ways that you can create really entertaining content out of it, basically.
Wow, that was really cool to see. Like even just how your brain, I've given you washing machines and I already feel like I might engage with some of that content.
I've got millions.
How many more of these can I do?
It's funny because it actually goes back to, I don't know if you remember, like in the start of YouTube, actually, there was a blender company that just created a whole content series around will it blend? And that was like an absurd,
was that a blender company?
Yeah, it was from a blender company themselves, and they just created a YouTube account that had, ended up with millions and millions of subscribers just from telling people if something will blend. That's like, and that's not even coming from like necessarily a human truth. I guess it's coming from the human truth of people like to see stupid shit happen online.
Yeah.
Curiosity, right? But I think the bigger thing behind that actually is from a strategic point of view, and we say this in Entertain or Die too, like, you have as a boring brand or boring category, you have the greatest chance for success because the competition around you is so boring and the bar is so low. So I actually love working with like boring categories or brands that are considered boring if they're willing to take a chance and experiment in the true sense of the word, and it's not going to become about talking about the mixed wash cycle 40-degree setting that we need to jam down people's throats. Then I think there's an amazing opportunity. If you look at Liquid Death and Duolingo, one's a water company, inherently a boring category. One's a language learning app, very boring category. So, there's a big chance for success.
Yeah, I don't know what Rosetta Stone are up to right now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, I've not even heard, that weirdly just came into my mind when I was like, what is another language app? Rosetta Stone.
Kicking themselves that they cancelled that Pharaoh mascot that they were gonna use. Probably.
I didn't know about that.
No,
I'll end my answer a bit, but that's the other thing is, yes, there's a very serious find the human insight answer that I've just given you, but also at the same time, and it's something that we spoke about at South by Southwest on one of our panels, but brands need to get out of their own asses a bit. I know you care deeply about your brand and your product, but you're not going to save the world with a washing machine. You don't need to do this hardy, purposeful thing. You can just get a bit weird with it. And again, if you're willing to take those risks and understand that nobody's sitting by their phone waiting for a piece of content from your brand. Nobody's waiting for the new product release date, but find something that's just weird, pushes it. You are much more likely to actually land with the audience that you want if you take yourself less seriously. That is the goal of entertainment to a certain degree. There is obviously the true human stories and, the really insightful, powerful, deeply rooted things that we want to hit upon. But there's also the sake of just making content and making something because it's fun and entertaining. So there's a spectrum that brands can live in there, but it only happens once they stop taking themselves so seriously.
Yeah, I love that. I want to get into the who, if I can, just understanding this talent roster. Like, who are these people and what are they doing that is getting people's attention? How do you engage with them? Tell me more about the people, the small world, I guess, housing or farming. How do I
We call it the roster. I guess signing would be a loose term, but they're never exclusive to us. We care a lot about that and it not being like a old school production house type approach where you can only work with us, because that's just not the nature of the world today. I'll let Sadia touch on it in more detail, but we always call them industry unstandard talent. We want to work with people who have touched entertainment but don't necessarily think about brands at all, and for that reason we'll think of solutions to ideas that are totally different. And I can maybe talk about a couple of different examples, but I'll let you sort of
No, go for it.
Give me the EVs.
Well, so like for instance, when we worked with Rescue Remedy on this weird unhinged comedy series called Rescue Rama, which was like little characters basically playing out situations like the morning after the Christmas work party where you've obviously done something horrible and heinous and can't remember about it, and you get a call from your mate to talk to you about it, or when you go on a date and there's somebody's catfished you, for instance. All like really relatable, again, situations that girls online on TikTok were already talking about the brand in the context of, and were using Rescue Remedy for. Sorry, for those who don't know what Rescue Remedy is, it's a anti-anxiety remedy basically that you would take.
Risky.
Originally was usually before like a driving test or exams and like very kind of like placid sort of safe scenarios, and they really pushed us to say, no, we want to be unhinged in that respect.
Wow.
Like this is how girls are actually using our product. We should be leaning into this, which is a great brief. For that brief, we said, okay, well, probably doesn't make sense to have some East London copywriter with a big beard and some geezer who's getting his coffee down Red Church Street or whatever. We should be working with the best up and coming female comedians around the UK. So for that brief, for instance, that we went and got 5-6 really brilliant up and coming comedy writers, basically, and content creators who are already creating content. Not massive at all, had relatively small followings, but had a brilliant creative skill set, were the girls in these sorts of situations and knew how to write that as comedy. And that became like our writer's room for that series. And we very much approached it like we were writing a sketch show, even though the actual physical characters went in it. It was like stop motion animation that we were acting out, but there was a new episode every single week. So it was literally run like a writer's room, like these girls kind of coming up with, riffing off different situations that we would chuck at them. Like, what if you went on a date and you got catfished? Or what if you went to a job interview and you completely lost your mind and forgot what was happening? And they would just riff off of that and just come up with ideas off the back of it. So that's like one example of like a very non-traditional entertainment first approach to, a more traditional legacy brand that's been around for like hundreds of years.
I love that.
Yeah.
Did you have one?
I don't have a specific person, but really what we look for when we're looking at our roster, essentially, I think there's like this bit of a thing that agencies and brands do, which is they see something that's going viral and being shared, and they take that to their creatives and say, okay, make me something like this. Just hire the person who made that thing. Yeah. That's essentially the what our roster is comprised of.
Yeah.
Jeff Lowe, amazing director, has made 1,000 commercials. Like, no shade on him whatsoever, but you will get more of that type of content if you work with your existing kind of A-list commercial directors, actors, photographers, rather than go to Reddit, which is where I go on a lot of Instagram, and find people who are creating the type of content that brands are wanting to replicate and bringing those people basically into your world to create for you. It's riskier, of course, but what's even riskier than that is trying to replicate something that's not authentic to the director or the photographer, whoever you're trying to hire to create something is. So it's exactly what the strategy was for Rescue Remedy. Instead of trying to replicate that with creatives who were not from that world, you just bring in people from that world and give them the chance to be part of something that typically they wouldn't be a part of.
It's funny, even just like hearing you say that, it sounds so obvious.
Yeah.
But I know that the majority of the industry that we came from, used to exist in, wouldn't perhaps think like that.
Yeah.
And like you can understand now, if I look at the kind of the landscape of the industry, and how in the middle you've got sort of creative agency and blah, 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 it does feel like the fringes are kind of going, yeah, we can do a lot of that, but faster and probably more on time and in culture with what's really going on. It surprises me that people haven't been thinking like this for longer. And I also imagine those people aren't going to be that highly in demand. Brands aren't knocking on these, on their doors going, hey, can you make us some ads? That thing's really relevant to our thing. It does take a strategic mind in between. I don't know if brands, can always find those humans that quickly because they haven't got the strategic or the creative person going, oh, this world and that world should actually be together.
Yeah.
How do you see this playing out? I want to get on to like my final question, which is more the who thing. But how do you see this playing out? 5 years now, like, where do you see this going? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the very best brands. Well, do you mean from an agency landscape perspective, or do you mean from a brand's perspective, or just life?
Wherever your mind goes.
Okay, nice one. Well, I'll take them both as separate things. I mean, we've talked about this in big depth. I think from an agency landscape or like service providers, whatever you want to call it, there's always going to be the need for top 1% creativity. Yeah. Agencies and companies like Mother, for instance, who are our investor. Brilliant, amazing company. They're always going to need to exist and need to work with the very top tier clients who need a kind of full service relationship. But then you're going to have this messy middle, which we've talked about already. You're starting to see people sort of fall out of that kind of messy middle. And then you've got this like layer of like specialization, basically, or, in my mind, the Willy Wonka shops, let's call them the Willy Wonkas who've really hung their hat on something that's like unique, specialist, different, has a unique kind of, thing that they offer. And to be honest, a lot of the time we'll work with the likes of Mother. We collaborate on projects with Mother all the time. And then I think from a brand's perspective, in-housing is not really going away. You're going to see lots of brands start to build. I don't think in-house agencies, I don't really necessarily think they work in the way that people think that they work. You will see you will see brands that have built in-house agencies working with agencies all the time. And like, it's a bit of a fallacy that they're not working with partners, or that they don't like to work with agencies or partners. I don't know why they say that they don't necessarily like to. But I think you will start to see sort of content studios effectively. So again, if you look at a brand like Liquid Death, like what they've built is basically like a Hollywood studio or a content studio within their brand, which can create content at speed, can create ideas at speed. And whether they're doing that with a partner like us, and we are acting as that kind of content studio, building them the parts that they necessarily need, or whether they're doing that fully in-house is another part of the story. But I think that's what you're going to start to see. Like, the brands that really want to win are going to cotton on to what Duolingo are doing, what Liquid Death are doing. And instead of like replicating a marketing team or like an advertising first approach to their marketing team, they're going to take like a content studio first approach to their marketing team, and they're going to either acquire small studios and pieces that they can build into their brand and their business to run like that, or they're going to work with partners like us to help build that out ad hoc and prove it works first.
Yeah. The only thing I'd add on to that is I think there will always be a place for traditional creatives and in-house agents and bits like that, but it is like Dan mentioned earlier on the nicheification. There are these niche subcultures on the fringe that have these amazing creators and amazing people in it who just have never had this gateway into the world where they can make something on a bigger platform. So I think in a couple of years, what it will be is, instead of brands trying to step into those worlds and then stepping all over things and just, obviously coming across the wrong way, bringing those people a bit closer into yours. It's something that we do a lot, is pairing traditional ad creatives with someone who's literally never written for a brand before. But they're phenomenal content creators or phenomenal script writers in other ways, or just do weird AI things, and then pairing them up with the traditional creative. So I think it will be that. It'll be a mix of many things, but not trying to replicate things, but bringing those people basically into your world to create for you.
And sorry, on the flip side of that is why you'll never be able to do it fully in-house, because those types of creators will never want to work. They'll always want to be able to share their skill sets across lots of different briefs and do lots of different things. So that's why it will always be this kind of hybrid model. And equally, brands like Liquid Death, they have built this content studio operation that can have people come in and out of it and ebb and flow from it. It'll be more about the processes that they're building to operate more like a Hollywood studio, TV studio than, an agency necessarily.
Yeah, I see fluidity with the agencies you work with, the humans you bring in. Like, it's much more about blurring. And again, like as you say, democratization is happening. That's happening for the individual creators. That's happening for the agencies. That's, everybody across the board is becoming democratized, I guess. Okay, I want to move on to my last question, guys. Can you believe it? And that's going to tell me if I've not mentioned something. We are fine. Okay, right. This one we've kept this question in because, like, obviously we are a talent growth business. We believe that, like, any introduction, you can make an introduction that could change the inflection of someone or some business's trajectory straight away. You could, like, one small introduction when you guys met each other, suddenly like new worlds are created.
Yep.
Equally, a lot of people go under the radar unknown. And therefore, we wanted to ask every one of our guests, who in the world do you believe should be known that perhaps isn't?
Yeah, we've in classic annoying creative fashion, we've actually broken the format and we've got 3 people.
Okay.
But they are in different buckets. So we've got one person
Give
from
me
the
who,
brand
give me a
world.
why.
Okay, cool. We've got one from the brand world, we've got one from our creative roster, and then we've got one from the agency world as well.
Okay.
So brand world, a guy called Harry Alonen, who is the brand director at Minecraft.
Okay.
Has just had obviously a massive breakout moment with the Minecraft movie. Is really great, smart guy who I think is worth the world knowing more about, and that's more about the people behind the massive successes that we see out there in the world. Speaking to them,
I love that.
From a creative point of view, there's a guy called Zach Beach who's on our roster. He does, if anyone, people might have seen this, well, they probably will have seen this brand on social. It's a brand called Pass Down. It's a kind of like streetwear brand. They did this loads of like viral pieces of content, but one in particular where a car smashes into a bollard and like 50 guys in puffer jackets run out of the car in like clown car fashion. Just like very cool, like disruptive VFX CG work that he does. And again, not necessarily from the world of marketing, branding, advertising. So yeah, Zach Beach, one to look into. And then Sadia.
Yeah, sorry, I've got 2 as well.
Oh, okay. You've got 4 now. Okay.
Yeah, from the agency world, Laura Petricelli. She's the CCO and co-founder of Nice and Frank.
Oh my God.
If you haven't,
Carry on. Sorry, carry on.
To be honest, I just met her recently, and it was only over a call, but she's really phenomenal. I think, especially as a creative, like building a network of people around you who can understand the world that you're in is really important. And so, just the idea of what her agency is about, Nice and Frank, those are 2 things the world needs more of: niceness and honesty. So she's phenomenal, and we've been working a lot with the Berry Boys, actually.
Yeah.
This production company that is also just been really great creative partners to us. They work a lot in VFX, but we just did a shoot with them on Monday that was quick fire. And again, being able to find like-minded creatives who are willing to work in this experimental, weird, let's go forward and make something that hasn't been made before in an interesting format is something that we've seen is working really well for us. So I would call out them as well.
What's really weird is, sorry, is her name Laura?
Laura Petricelli, yeah.
Yeah, Petricelli. She was the last guest on this podcast in New York. So that's going to be a nice little, okay, fine. Wow, that's amazing. How weird. Like, I've not, it was Sam that hosted. But Sam had the same thing of like, I love her. She's incredible. Guys, I want to say thank you so much. You've absolutely smashed this.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. And you will see this in the world, entertaining the world, one platform at a time.
Hopefully.
Thank you.
There you go. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.